The first sign something was wrong came as an unnatural hum that rippled through the hull of the ascendant horizon. Commander Lena Corvin froze, her gloved hand gripping the edge of her console as the ship's stabilizers groaned. The crew, a mix of seasoned veterans and new recruits, exchanged tense glances. The hum turned into a low vibration, a frequency that made Lena's teeth buzz. "Status report," she barked, snapping her focus to the tactical officer, Tarek Dean. He squinted at his console, his hands flying over the holographic interface. It's the Lagrange station, Commander. The structure is emitting some kind of..." The ship bucked violently, cutting him off. Lights flickered across the bridge, and a cascade of error messages flooded every screen. Lena's mind raced as alarms blared around her. "Shields holding at 72%, shouted Katia, the engineering lead, her voice strained. "But there's some kind of..." A deafening crack reverberated through the ship, followed by a hollow silence. Then, as if summoned by the universe itself, the view beyond the bridge shifted. Where once there was the endless, star-speckled void, now stood the Lagrange structure. No one on the horizon had seen it up close before. Suspended between Earth and its moon, the enigmatic structure had been a mystery since its discovery 2 decades earlier. A perfect geometric lattice stretching hundreds of kilometers, its origin and purpose had defied explanation. Humanity had sent probes, but none returned. Now, the Horizon, Earth's most advanced research and tactical vessel, floated just a few kilometers from the entity. "It pulled us in," whispered Dr. Mireille Harth, the ship's lead xenoarchaeologist, her usually steady voice trembling. "The Lagrange structure pulled us into its orbit." Before Lena could respond, a jarring beam of light erupted from the latticework, piercing the ship's hull. The bridge was bathed in an otherworldly blue glow. The light wasn't just illuminating the space, it was moving, scanning. Lena's fingers tightened on her console. "Get us out of here," she ordered. "Engines are offline," Katia yelled. Lena turned to Tarek. "Weapons." "Unresponsive," he snapped back. The light moved closer, now crawling over the crew's faces like a living thing. Lena felt a wave of nausea as it passed through her. It wasn't just light, it was information, probing, analyzing. She could feel it digging into her thoughts, pulling at her memories. And then it was gone. The bridge was dark for a heartbeat before the emergency lighting kicked in. "Report," Lena barked. "The system reset," Katia said, disbelief etched across her face. "It's like it never happened. But the engines, shields, weapons, everything's still down." Lena's comm crackled. "Bridge, this is Deck 3, came a frantic voice. "We've got something here. People are missing. They just vanished." The message was cut off by a guttural scream. "Security, with me," Lena ordered, already unholstering her sidearm. "Dean, you have the bridge. If we're not back in 10, lock it down." Dean nodded grimly, his hand hovering over the controls. Lena, Katia, and a squad of 4 security officers descended to Deck 3. The air was thick with tension. Emergency lights cast long, flickering shadows down the corridor. They moved in formation, weapons drawn, the silence broken only by the hum of malfunctioning systems. "Where's the crew?" Lena asked as they reached the central hub. It was eerily empty. A figure stumbled out from a side corridor. It was Ensign Cole, one of the ship's engineers. His face was pale, his eyes wide with terror. "They took them," he stammered. "They took them into the walls." "What are you talking about?" Lena demanded. Before he could answer, the walls of the corridor shimmered. What had been smooth metal was now translucent, revealing the lattice of the Lagrange structure outside. The crew stood frozen as shapes began to emerge, humanoid, but not human. They were made of light, their forms shifting like data streams, with faces that flickered in and out of focus. "They're inside the ship," one of the security officers shouted, firing a plasma bolt. The bolt passed through one of the entities, hitting the wall behind it. The light being turned, its shape twisting into something more menacing. It lunged forward, its arm slicing through the officer's chest. The man crumpled, lifeless, as the entity absorbed the energy from his suit. "Fall back," Lena ordered, firing her weapon as the team retreated. Her shots didn't hurt the entities, but they slowed them down. "What are they?" Katia yelled, covering their rear. "Survivors," Lena guessed, her mind racing. "Or whatever made the structure." The crew reached the emergency bulkhead. Lena slammed her hand on the panel, sealing the door behind them. The entities didn't follow, but their faint, ghostly outlines hovered beyond the barrier. Katia leaned against the wall, panting. "Commander, we can't fight these things. And if they are taking the crew?" "We need answers," Lena said. "And we're not getting them here. Katia, find a way to get the engines back online. We're not staying in this orbit any longer than we have to." Katia nodded, already pulling up her portable diagnostic console. Lena turned to the remaining security officers. "You're with me. We're heading to the observation deck. If the Lagrange structure brought us here, maybe it left us a clue as to why." The trek through the ship was unnerving. Entire sections were deserted, and the eerie hum of the structure seemed to grow louder with each step. The observation deck was a panoramic chamber with reinforced glass walls offering an unobstructed view of space. But now, all they could see was the Lagrange structure. Lena approached the central console and activated the external scanners. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a detailed map of the lattice. Her breath caught. "There," she said, pointing to a central node glowing brighter than the rest. "That's the core. It's generating the energy field that's holding us here." "We're not equipped to handle this, Commander," one of the security officers said. "We need to call for backup." "There won't be backup," Lena said grimly. "The last thing Earth Command wants is to risk another ship. It's just us." The hologram shifted, and Lena froze. A new image appeared, an intricate pattern of symbols spiraling outward from the core. It wasn't random. It was a message. Before Lena could decipher it, the symbols shifted again, forming a single word in perfect English. "Enter." A sudden tremor rocked the ship, and the Lagrange structure began to change. Its lattice unfolded, creating a massive gateway. From within, a swirling vortex of light and shadow beckoned. "What the hell is that?" Katia's voice crackled over the comm. "It's an invitation," Lena said, her jaw tightening. "Or a trap," one of the officers muttered. Lena stared at the vortex, her mind a storm of questions. Whatever was waiting on the other side, it had the answers they needed. "Prepare the shuttle," she ordered. "We're going in." The officer hesitated. "Commander." "That's an order," Lena snapped, her voice steel. The crew moved quickly, their fear palpable. As Lena boarded the shuttle, she cast one last look at the ship she might never see again. "Commander, are you sure about this?" Katia asked over the comm. "No," Lena admitted. "But if we don't find out what's inside that structure, none of us are getting out of here alive." The shuttle launched, hurtling toward the gateway. The Lagrange structure loomed larger with every second, its vast, alien design a testament to something far beyond human comprehension. As the vortex swallowed them, Lena's final thought was a desperate hope that they weren't flying into oblivion. But deep down, she knew the truth. This was only the beginning. The shuttle bucked as it entered the vortex, the walls of reality seeming to twist and contort around it. Commander Lena Corvin gripped the armrest of her seat, her eyes glued to the display ahead. The swirling chaos outside the viewport pulsed with impossible colors, each flicker resonating with a low hum that seemed to vibrate in her chest. "Stabilizers are barely holding," said Ensign Marta Vallon, the shuttle's pilot, her knuckles white as she fought the controls. "I can't even tell if we're moving forward or falling." Lena didn't answer. She was too busy scanning the ship's sensors, which were feeding back nonsense, distorted readings of gravitational waves, electromagnetic surges, and energy levels so high they should have shredded the shuttle. And yet, they were alive. "Just keep us steady," Lena said, her voice calm despite the chaos. Suddenly, the vortex parted, spitting them into a vast, open expanse. The crew collectively gasped. They were inside. The Lagrange structure's interior was nothing like its cold, geometric exterior. It was a cathedral of alien engineering. Towering spires of luminous crystal stretched into a dark void, their surfaces alive with shifting patterns of light. Rivers of liquid energy coursed through the air, suspended in gravity-defying arcs. The air, or whatever passed for it, seemed thick with static, crackling faintly against their suits. "What the hell is this?" muttered Corporal Juno Rel, one of the security officers. "It's alive," whispered Lena, her eyes tracing the organic flow of energy between the spires. "Alive," Valen said, incredulous. Lena nodded. "Look at the patterns. It's not random. This entire structure, it's processing something. Thoughts. Data. Maybe both." Before anyone could respond, the shuttle's lights flickered, and a deep vibration resonated through the hull. "We're being pulled," Valen said, frantically tapping at the controls. "I'm not doing this." The shuttle began to descend, guided by an unseen force toward a massive platform that jutted out from the base of one of the crystalline spires. As they touched down, Lena felt her stomach twist. This wasn't a landing. It was an invitation. "Stay alert," Lena said as the crew disembarked. The platform was smooth and black, reflecting the shifting light from the spires above. Lena's boots clicked against its surface as she stepped forward, weapon drawn. A low hum filled the air, growing louder with each step. The crew formed a tight formation, weapons at the ready, as the hum coalesced into something more tangible, a voice. "You have come." The voice wasn't spoken. It was felt, resonating in their bones and minds. The crew froze, their eyes darting around for the source. "Who are you?" Lena demanded, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. There was no answer. Instead, the platform shifted beneath their feet, its surface rippling like water. Light erupted in front of them, coalescing into a towering figure. It was humanoid, but only vaguely. Its body was made of the same shimmering energy they'd seen aboard the ship, its face an ever-changing mosaic of shapes and symbols. "You are not the first to arrive," the figure said, its tone neither welcoming nor hostile. "What do you mean?" Lena asked, keeping her weapon trained on the entity. The figure tilted its head, as if considering her. "Others like you have come. None have succeeded." "Succeeded at what?" The entity raised an arm, pointing toward the massive spire. "To ascend." A chill ran down Lena's spine. "We didn't come here to ascend. We came here because you pulled us in." "Your arrival was inevitable," the figure replied. "This is the crucible. The test. You will face what the others could not." Before Lena could demand more answers, the platform began to dissolve, the edges crumbling into a swirling abyss. "Fall back," she yelled, but there was nowhere to go. The crew was swallowed by the light. When Lena's vision cleared, she was standing in a stark, white chamber. The air felt heavy, and an oppressive silence pressed down on her ears. Her team was scattered around her, dazed but alive. "What just happened?" Valen groaned, pulling herself to her feet. "We've been moved," Lena said, scanning the room. The walls were smooth and featureless, save for a single black door at the far end. "Commander, look," Rel said, pointing to the floor. Lena followed his gaze. Beneath their feet was an intricate pattern, similar to the symbols they'd seen on the hologram back on the horizon. But now, the symbols were glowing faintly, their light pulsing in rhythm with the hum of the structure. The black door slid open without warning. Beyond it was a corridor bathed in crimson light. "Do we have a choice?" Valen asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "No," Lena said, stepping toward the door. The corridor was narrow, the walls lined with strange, shifting shapes that seemed to watch them as they passed. The hum grew louder, morphing into a low, guttural growl that set their nerves on edge. They reached another chamber, this one vast and dark. In the center stood a massive obelisk, its surface covered in the same glowing symbols. As they approached, the obelisk flared to life, projecting a series of holographic images into the air. The images were of Earth. Cities burning. Oceans boiling. The sky torn apart by storms of fire and ash. "What is this?" Valen whispered, horror in her voice. "A warning," the voice from before echoed through the chamber. "Your world stands on the precipice. Your species is fragile, unworthy of the knowledge contained within the structure. Prove otherwise, or be extinguished." The obelisk shifted, revealing a console at its base. Symbols scrolled across its surface, accompanied by a timer counting down. Great, Rel muttered. A puzzle. Because we're not under enough pressure already. Focus, Lena snapped, her mind racing. She recognized some of the symbols from the scans back on the horizon. They were mathematical equations, but the others? It's a test of knowledge, Valen said, stepping closer. Math, physics, maybe even language. It's trying to see if we can solve it. The timer ticked down. 10 minutes. Lena glanced at her team. Katia, Valen, this is your field. The rest of us will keep watch. As the two officers worked on the console, Lena paced the chamber, her weapon at the ready. The hum was growing louder, more erratic, as if the structure itself was reacting to their presence. A sound echoed through the chamber, a deep, resonant thrum that sent a shiver down Lena's spine. We've got company, Rel shouted, pointing to the far side of the room. The light beings from before were emerging from the walls, their forms more defined and aggressive. Keep them off us! Lena yelled, opening fire. The battle was chaos. Plasma bolts lit up the chamber as the crew fought to hold their ground. The entities were relentless, their forms shifting and flickering as they attacked. Hurry up! Lena shouted over the commotion. We're almost there. Valen called back, her hands flying over the console. The timer ticked down. 30 seconds. One of the entities lunged at Lena, its arm slicing through her armor. She cried out, stumbling back, but Rel stepped in, unloading a burst of plasma that sent the creature reeling. Got it! Valen yelled. The obelisk flared, its symbols rearranging into a coherent sequence. The entities froze, their forms flickering before dissolving into light. The chamber fell silent. The obelisk emitted a low hum, and the voice returned. You have passed the first threshold. Prepare for the next. Lena didn't have time to react before the chamber dissolved around them, and they were plunged into darkness once more. Lena hit the ground hard, her knees buckling as the darkness receded. She stood in what appeared to be a barren landscape under an endless black sky. Around her, her team groaned and scrambled to their feet, their suits flickering with residual energy from the transition. The air here felt heavier, colder, pressing against their skin despite the protective layers of their suits. The surface beneath their boots wasn't stone or metal but something else, something alive. It pulsed faintly, as though the ground itself had a heartbeat. This place just keeps getting better, muttered Rel, sweeping his rifle across the alien horizon. Lena ignored him, her eyes scanning their surroundings. The landscape was dominated by towering monoliths, their surfaces engraved with the same glowing symbols that had haunted them since their arrival. In the distance, a massive tower rose into the blackness, its tip vanishing into the void above. It's the core, Lena said, her voice firm. That's where we're being guided. Guided? Valen said, her voice laced with skepticism. Feels more like we're being corralled. Either way, it's our only path, Lena replied. A low, resonant hum filled the air, cutting off any further debate. It was different this time, deeper, more ominous. The monoliths around them began to glow brighter, their symbols rearranging themselves in a hypnotic dance of light. Commander, Katia said, her voice trembling. We're not alone. From the base of the nearest monolith, shadows began to stretch and rise, taking shape. Unlike the light beings from before, these figures were darker, denser, their forms wrapped in writhing tendrils of black and red energy. Their presence exuded an overwhelming sense of malice. Defensive positions. Lena barked, raising her weapon. The shadow creatures didn't wait. They moved with impossible speed, their tendrils lashing out like whips. The first struck Rel, sending him flying backward into a jagged protrusion. He didn't get up. Lena fired, her plasma bolts cutting through the air. This time, the creatures reacted, their forms rippling as if in pain. But they didn't stop. Focus fire, she shouted, aiming at the nearest creature. The team coordinated their attack, driving the creature back as its tendrils disintegrated under the concentrated barrage. But for every one they destroyed, two more emerged from the monoliths. We can't hold them off forever, Katia yelled, her voice cracking. Fall back toward the tower, Lena ordered. The team retreated, firing as they moved. The creatures pursued relentlessly, their numbers growing with each passing second. The ground beneath their feet shifted, pulsating in rhythm with the creatures' movements, as if the entire landscape was working against them. By the time they reached the base of the tower, they were nearly surrounded. A massive door loomed before them, its surface engraved with a spiral of glowing symbols. "Katia!" Lena shouted. "Get that door open." Katia dropped to one knee, her portable diagnostic console already working to interface with the alien technology. Her fingers flew over the device as the rest of the team held their ground. "We're out of time, Commander!" Valen shouted, her voice panicked. "Not yet," Lena growled, firing into the massive creatures. The door groaned, its surface splitting open to reveal a narrow passageway filled with blinding light. "Go!" Katia yelled. The team scrambled through the opening as the creatures lunged. One of them snagged Valen, its tendrils wrapping around her leg. She screamed as Lena spun, firing a shot that severed the tendrils. Valen collapsed inside, and the door slammed shut, cutting off the creatures. The sudden silence was deafening. Lena turned to her team, her chest heaving. "Everyone still breathing?" Katia nodded, though her face was pale. Valen clutched her leg, which was oozing a faint, glowing residue where the tendrils had gripped her. "I don't know what that stuff is," she said through gritted teeth. "We'll deal with it later," Lena said, though the truth was, she wasn't sure there would be a later. The passageway led upward, spiraling around the core of the tower. As they ascended, the air grew heavier, the light brighter. Symbols danced along the walls, their patterns growing increasingly complex. "Do you hear that?" Katia asked after a few minutes. Lena stopped, listening. It was faint at first, but it grew louder with every step, a deep, resonant chanting, like the voices of 1,000 beings speaking as one. They reached a wide chamber at the top of the spiral. The chanting ceased abruptly, leaving only the hum of the core, which dominated the room. It was a massive crystalline structure, its surface alive with shifting patterns of light. "Commander," Katia said, her voice hushed. "This is it. The heart of the structure." Lena approached the core, her eyes narrowing. Symbols floated in the air around it, rearranging themselves into something she could almost understand. "This is why it brought us here," she said. "This is the test." "What kind of test?" Valen asked, wincing as she leaned against the wall. Lena didn't answer. She reached out, her hand hovering over the core. As her fingers brushed its surface, the room dissolved into light. Lena found herself standing in a void, alone. Before her stood the figure from the platform, its form more defined now, its face a perfect reflection of hers. "You have reached the final threshold," it said. "But you are not prepared." "What do you mean?" Lena demanded. The figure's face shifted, becoming a mosaic of countless other faces. "Your species has potential, but it is flawed. Divided. Reckless. This knowledge could save you, or destroy you. Then why bring us here?" "Because the choice must be made." The void around them filled with images, Earth, spinning serenely in space, its cities illuminated by human ambition. Then came the darker images: war, famine, environmental collapse. "If you fail, your world will burn," the figure said. "If you succeed, you may survive. But survival has a price." "What price?" Lena asked, her voice steady. The figure's face shifted back to hers. "One must stay. To maintain the connection. To hold the gateway open. Without this, the knowledge cannot flow." Lena's heart sank. "A sacrifice. A choice," the figure corrected. "Make it." The void dissolved, and Lena was back in the chamber with her team. The core pulsed, its light intensifying. "What happened?" Katia asked, stepping forward. Lena looked at her team, at the exhaustion and fear in their eyes. She thought of Earth, of everything waiting for them back home. She thought of the price. And she made her decision. "We're taking the knowledge," Lena said, her voice resolute. "No matter what it costs." The core flared, and the room began to collapse. The chamber erupted in a kaleidoscope of light, the walls melting into streams of energy as the core roared to life. The ground trembled beneath Lena's feet, and a deafening hum filled the air. Her team staggered, shielding their eyes against the blinding glow emanating from the crystalline heart of the tower. "Commander, what's happening?" Katia shouted, her voice barely audible over the rising cacophony. "It's reacting to the decision," Lena said, her voice firm despite the chaos. The core's patterns accelerated, symbols swirling faster and faster, morphing into shapes too intricate for the human eye to comprehend. Suddenly, beams of light shot out from the core, encircling each member of the team. Lena felt an immense pressure on her chest, as though the air itself had turned solid. A voice, the same alien presence they had encountered before, resonated through the chamber. "The choice has been made. The gateway will open. Prepare for the cost." The beams tightened, pulling them closer to the core. Lena struggled against the force, her mind racing. "Everyone hold on." "No!" Valen screamed, clawing at the light surrounding her. "We didn't sign up for this." The light around Valen intensified, her body convulsing as the glowing residue from her earlier injury began to spread. Her screams cut through the chaos, and then, without warning, she disintegrated into a burst of light. "Valen!" Katia screamed, lunging toward where her teammate had stood. Lena grabbed her, pulling her back. "There's nothing we can do. Stay focused." The core flared again, its light now reaching beyond the chamber, piercing the black sky above. A fissure began to form in the void, a jagged tear that radiated energy so intense it made the ground quake. "The gateway," Katia whispered, her voice trembling. Lena glanced toward the fissure. It was beautiful and terrifying, a window into a realm of pure, incomprehensible energy. Through it, she caught glimpses of something. Structures of impossible geometry, shifting landscapes, and what looked like stars being born and dying in mere moments. "It's not just knowledge," Lena murmured. "It's a doorway to their reality." The alien voice spoke again, louder this time. "One must remain. The gate requires an anchor." The pressure on Lena's chest intensified, and she realized what was happening. The core wasn't waiting for them to decide, it was choosing. "No," Lena growled, her hands curling into fists. "I made the decision. Take me." The light beams shifted, pulsing as if in response. The symbols on the core changed, forming a pattern that pulsed in time with her heartbeat. "Commander, no," Katia said, grabbing her arm. "There's no other way," Lena said, pulling free. "If I don't stay, the gateway closes, and everything we've done here will be for nothing." Rel, clutching his side from an earlier injury, stepped forward. "There has to be another way. Let's figure this out. There's no time." Lena snapped, pointing toward the fissure. It was beginning to shrink, the jagged edges flickering as if struggling to hold together. Lena turned back to the core, her resolve hardening. "Get to the shuttle. Take what you can and get out of here." "That's an order." Katia shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "We're not leaving you. You don't have a choice." Lena shouted, her voice breaking. "This is bigger than us, bigger than any of us. Go." The light beams around the others began to fade, releasing them. The pressure lifted from their bodies, and the room seemed to shift, the core directing its energy solely at Lena. "Commander," Rel said, his voice soft. Lena turned to face them one last time, forcing a smile. "Get home. Make this mean something." Katia hesitated, her hands trembling. But then the floor beneath them shifted, and an unseen force pushed them back toward the spiral staircase. Lena watched as her team was carried away, their protests drowned out by the rising hum of the core. When they were gone, she turned back to the fissure, her body bathed in its radiant glow. The voice spoke one final time. "You are the anchor. The knowledge will flow. Your sacrifice will sustain the connection." Lena stepped closer to the core, the light around her growing so intense that it seared her skin through the suit. Pain racked her body, but she didn't falter. "For Earth," she whispered. The core's light engulfed her, and everything went white. The horizon drifted in the void, its hull battered but intact. Katia sat in the cockpit, her hands trembling as she gripped the controls. Beside her, Rel and the remaining crew sat in stunned silence, the weight of what had happened pressing down on them. "Did we make it?" Rel asked, his voice hoarse. Katia nodded, her eyes fixed on the glowing fissure in the distance. It was still open, its light casting an eerie glow across the ship. As they watched, streams of data began to pour from the fissure, coalescing into patterns that their onboard computers scrambled to interpret. "It's working," Katia said, her voice a mix of awe and grief. She did it. The data streams were incomprehensible, but they carried with them a sense of immense power, knowledge that could reshape their understanding of the universe. "Now what?" Rel asked, leaning back in his seat. Katia didn't answer immediately. She stared at the fissure, at the impossible structure that had claimed their commander. "Now," she said finally, her voice heavy, "we make sure her sacrifice wasn't in vain." The fissure pulsed one last time, and then the Lagrange structure began to fade, its form dissolving into the void. As the horizon turned away, its engines flaring to life, a single thought echoed in Katia's mind. The cost of salvation was steep. But it had been paid. And the universe would never be the same.